So this is an overview of the metrics APIs being added to Steel Central AppInternals. So metrics APIs are some RESTful APIs to access the metric data stored in the AppInternals analysis server. It'll provide end users the ability to get basically the information that populates many of the cards in the UI. You can get both summarized data that appears in the table portion of the UI or the time series data that appears in the graphs. This current API does not cover the forensic data, so access to the individual transactions. And obviously, the API does not provide access to metrics that are not pre-computed by the analysis server yet. So the API has several different portions to it. The metrics API returns is the main one that returns the summarized and time series data. So, for example, you could see transaction counts, exception counts, response times, heap usage, CPU utilization, basically all the metrics that you see in the analysis portion of the analysis server. There's a variation of that called metrics top end, which lets you sort by a particular metric and get the get metrics for the top end objects sorted by a particular metric. So, for example, you could get all of the response times for the top applications sorted by exception count. In addition, there's a few helper APIs. So metric names returns a list of all the different metric names that can be provided in queries. Object categories returns the list of all the object types and the set of metrics available for each object type. Applications returns the set of applications that have been configured. There's also one for transaction types. So for the initial prototype here, the authentication is done using basic authentication by passing in the credentials to a login URL. The plan supports authentication using keys for the GAs. All right, let's jump over to a quick demo. So for the login, just passing in the username and password right now. There's an API here to get the version. The query gets returned what version the software is currently running. The metrics API is what gets passed into the body. So you pass the start time that you're interested in. The duration in seconds is the time span. So it goes from the start time to the width, the bucket width. So in this case, the duration is 3,600 seconds. So you're basically getting 1 minute buckets spanning an hour of time. Include time series true means we'll get time series data in addition to the summarized data. And in this case, we're filtering on the server that says the cfnjackson02.lab.automate.com, and we are going to be returning the average response time and the transaction count. The API, so here's all the response times for that transaction. So if we jump over to the UI for this same time window, we can see that the response time on this server was 8 milliseconds, and this is the same value that we're getting back from the API for that time window. This is an example of the metrics top end. in this case, we're getting the top n instances sorted by the amount of memory being used by those instances, and then we were getting the amount of memory that they're using in addition to the response time. At the bottom of the response, it also tells you, how many, different objects there were that matched the query. In this case, we only got 5 of the results. Okay, object categories, just a helper, as I mentioned before. It shows the different types of categories and what the different metrics are. These are sort of the keys into the metrics. You get information about what each one of these metrics is. You can use this metric names API. For example, the duration metric that I was getting before, server duration, that's the server response time and the units per millisecond. Transaction types API returns the transaction types that are currently configured on that server, so home, login, logout, portfolio analysis. The UI that corresponds to the transaction types that were defined. So home, login, logout, portfolio analysis. Applications, very similar in this case, it's just one application defined on the server, trade task application. And that's it.